say hi and thank them. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, if you monitor that for me, that'd be awesome because I
I will.
kind of get in the zone and who knows what'll happen.
Right. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you know, the first time I ever met Keith was in a taco restaurant next to the university building at one of the Out of Chicago, like about, I don't know, 4 years ago, the Out of Chicago conference. I think
Yeah.
it might have been that large, like 680 people one that he had, right?
Yeah.
And he came in with Tony Rainez, and I said, "This Keith guy, he's a character, man. He is really a character." Now, when people tell you that you're a character, you got to listen to who's saying it.
Okay.
If it's someone like me who's saying it, it's a compliment.
All
Some
right.
other person might be saying that it might not be so much of a compliment, but for coming from me, people say that about me too. So for coming from me, that's a damn compliment. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Carlos.
All right.
Yeah, that was I believe the 2017.
Yes.
That was the year Tony and I did the Baton Death March. We did like a 7.5 mile photo walk down the Chicago River. That was insane. I think we started out with about 60 people and we finished with 9.
Oh, wow. Wow. And for those of you following our Photo Club Revolution, you can read the link to my manifesto on the Garden Photo site. Basically, it was my discussion with Keith that kind of kicked off this whole thing when I was selling him a lens backstage at CACA, and we started talking about why are people quitting photo clubs?
Oh, okay.
That's the problem. You know, hurt feelings. And this gave me some ideas. And now for the whole last year, we have completely revamped our categories to separate nature away from other. Okay. And the Downers Grove is now going to do the same thing based on our ideas for next year. And other people seem to have shown some interest.
You froze.
So thank you, Keith, for getting my wheels going.
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. That's
yeah.
That conversation started just Tony and I over the phone one day, and we both got a little heated because it's emotional. You know, we want the best for our clubs, and you know, we just saw them stagnant. So I think we've done well in Elgin too. So if you want me to go ahead and start, I'll go ahead and share my screen and see what happens here. I believe that's the one I want. Let's share that. Let's go into program mode. All right. Beautiful. Outstanding. I can see my screen and I can tell at least the first loudest 3 people if they're falling asleep or not. Hey, Jim Frazier, how you doing, buddy? Thanks for the wave. I appreciate it. So yeah, in fact, hopefully Jim can attest to it. We've made some changes at the Elgin Camera Club too, and it's been really good to see. So, but you know what? Let me just kind of get going here. Who's Keith French? You know, I am a full-time commercial photographer here in the Chicagoland area, but I've got about a 600-mile radius, and I have corporate clients all over the place, and it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. But you know, I'm getting into the twilight time, and so I've been doing a lot of new things. And one of them in the last 10 years has been to be a workshop host. I started out on my own. And then when Tony and I met in 2016, Tony Rainez, we started putting a couple of them together. We've been having a great time with that too. And some of the shots you'll see tonight are from one of or actually several of our trips to the same place. I also do a lot of one-on-one instructing. Excuse me, it's on my website. People want to join, or they want to get some one-on-one. Maybe they want to fine-tune something. Maybe they want to learn something new. You know, I just started doing photography in 1984, so I'm a little new at this, but I'm trying. I did present a couple of times at CAPS. For those of you that graced my room, we had a blast. I told a really funny story the last time, only because I showed up for the first morning without my presentation and had to drive home and get it and back and still made it in time to shove a cupcake down my throat. So that was exciting. As mentioned earlier, I did work with Chris on a couple of the Out of Chicago's. I missed the first one. Well, I was a volunteer for the first one, but then we did a lot of fun stuff up through 2018. And I really enjoyed that. And I'm grateful for that opportunity as well. And to kind of round things off, I used to own a camera store. So I've got a crazy background, but I had a camera store here in Elgin for about 14 years or so. And then finally gave it up in 2011 when I couldn't sell anything in the front end, but in the back end where the studio was and the film lab, that was doing good. So now I moved it to my studio in my garage. So if you guys smell Fixer, it's because I was processing film. Yep, people still shoot film. All right. So without any more further who's me and what I do, let's just get going here. So today we're going to talk about ruins and abandoned structures. This is a probably one of the newest ventures of photography that I dove into hard. Tony and I talked about it at first back in 2016, and I was like, and then we talked a little more, and I was like, but he started showing me a few shots that he managed on his way back, driving from Washington State back home when he was still here in Illinois. And he hit me up with some shots, and I'm like, okay, I can like this. So that's what we did. And that's how, I haven't been doing it forever, but I like it and I dove in deep. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just kind of some of the basics. How do we find these things? How do we gain access to these things? Safety, big important thing on safety. I'll tell you a sad story soon. The photographic approach, right? Now you found it, we got access. How are we going to take a picture? What's the best way to manipulate and fix the camera and go for that? And then throughout this process, I'm going to talk post-production. We're not actually going to go and do some real post-production because we just don't have enough time and maybe bandwidth. But I will talk the different tools that I use, how I use them, maybe share a few things with you. But before I go any farther, I can see Jim Fraser. So Jim, if you can hear me really well and everything seems like it's balanced, okay, just give me a thumbs up. All right, buddy. Thank you so much. I can't make out the other two people I can see. Somebody's extremely backlit. And then I see a golf course. So no names, please. Anyway, all right, let's get started. So one of the ways that probably one of the easiest ways to find things where they're abandoned is just go onto Facebook and in the search bar, just type in the word abandoned and maybe one more thing: abandoned Illinois, abandoned Lake County, abandoned boats, abandoned airplanes, whatever. And you will probably find a Facebook group that is having fun with abandoned things. And you can whittle down through them. I would suggest participating a little bit before you start asking super detailed questions about locations, because some people are a little protective, but most of the groups are fairly friendly and you can get some good intel. So that's really a very simple way of finding things of abandoned. Also, if you're a hashtagger, Instagram or in Facebook, same thing. If you hashtag the word abandoned and then type anything behind it, you'll get information about that stuff. So, abandoned barns, abandoned farmhouses, abandoned homesteads, abandoned prisons, whatever you want, whatever you're looking for, abandoned cars in Cook County, just things like that. You'd be surprised what pops up. Of course, being in a camera club like this, with a pretty healthy membership, word of mouth is always great. You got, people that know you are a little more ready and available to share with you information. They trust you. They know you're not going to go there and graffiti the place or take things out of it. So word of mouth is always a good one. If you know anybody who does abandoned or like photography workshops, those are a great place because now you don't have to do anything but enjoy. You don't have, the only work you got to do is push the shutter button down and then sleep between stops. And those are a lot of fun. And then, of course, there's always the 45-minute rule. This is actually Tony's. I can't take credit for this. The 45-minute rule is find a rural road and stay on it for 45 minutes, and you'll probably find something abandoned. So it works really well. And Tony stands by it, and he'll fight you tooth and nail if you try to tell him it doesn't work. So, Okay, so let's say you got some things and you found them and maybe you want to get some intel and you're looking at your Google map, and that's what that is. That's Google map right there in front of you. And one of the things a lot of people don't notice is down in that corner, there's your satellite view. That satellite view is absolutely stunning because with that satellite view, when you click on it, it flips. See how it flips? And the nice thing about that is now you can zoom in with the same distance, but now you can see the shadows. And the shadows are really the telltale sign of what you're looking at. Okay. Why are there always shadows when the Google satellite goes overhead? Because the Google satellite only flies over and takes pictures when it's not cloudy. It took me a while to figure that out, believe it or not. All right, we need to mute somebody.
I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
And said, oh, I
Okay,
ordered an
could
orange
the
chair,
person
and
who's
he
talking,
picked it out to me,
let's
and
see, how about, there we go.
Outstanding. Yep. Somebody, yeah, we once in a while people they demute, not sure why. But that's okay. Okay, so your shadow, when you look down in, oops, what happened here? There we go. You see that shadow, that steeple? Look how pronounced that is. Okay. Now, if you were just looking straight down and didn't think to look for that shadow, it's just another rooftop. But once you zoom in and see that shadow, now you know you're looking at a church. Of course, obviously somebody tagged it, so that makes it a lot easier. But, you know, I can tell you there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't get tagged because there's just too many of them out there. So looking at the shadow, forget the building, look for the shadow. And of course, the farther north you are in the United States, the more pronounced the shadows are, because most of our satellites are going east to west or west to east. And so they're not necessarily directly over the spot when they're shooting. They might be, you know, 300, 400, 500 miles south, kind of looking. So plus the sun, look where the sun's in the southern hemisphere. So that's nice too. So it helps. All right. So accessing. Anybody have any question on Google Map, or somebody learned something that like you just can't wait to share it? Going once, going twice. By the way, did you know that if you hold the space bar down, it's a temporary unmute? That's another nice trick on Zoom. And then when you let go, it's like keying a microphone. Then you let go, you're back on mute. Okay, so there you are. You found a place. It looks pretty cool and you want to access it. And you show up and you start looking around and you start seeing stuff like this. You're like, oh boy, now what? Okay. Well, a couple of things you need to know. Most of the time, Officer Friendly, when he shows up, if you're out there and you've passed one of these signs, most of the time he was called. Very rare are they going to stop and look unless there's been problems in the property in the past and they see a car in a driveway or they see the car in the woods, around here anyway. But you get up in these rural areas, northern Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, you know, the sheriff's not going to stop unless somebody calls him. And then once somebody calls them, there's going to be some level of discomfort. They might throw you out. They might hold you until the person who owns the property shows up to decide if they're going to press charges. You know, so I kind of say, is it worth it? I don't know. If the sign is super beat up, you know, and it's buried in the ground and it's fallen over and it's, you know, it's all scribbled on and shot up, you might be able to, I didn't see it. But I'm amazed at the number of photographers that just ignore these and go in and say, well, but I'm just taking pictures. I'm not hunting, fishing, or trapping. Yeah, but no trespassing is no trespassing, not just for those reasons. You know, and you have to be careful too, because in some states, property owners are given the ability to defend their property. I don't know which states are which, but when you come across a sign like this, you probably should just keep driving. You know, because even if he's a bad shot, he's going to keep shooting. So, but trespassing signs aren't always all bad, because in some places, the actual property owner may give you a place to contact. In this case, this gentleman, Lee Brandvold, was in a very small town in Ryder, North Dakota, and he put that on the sign. The sign was very new. And Ryder was about 4 miles away, and Tony and I drove to Ryder, and we almost missed it, all 6 buildings. we happened to see 4 cars parked in front of the church and the door open. So we walked in during the day. They were having some kind of potluck or something. We asked if anybody knew Lee Braunvold. And one guy goes, hey, he's in Florida, but I got him on my phone if you want to call him. So we tried calling this guy to get permission to go on his property because he had a really cool old house, but we got voicemail. But it was a lot better than, it was nice. We had an opportunity to get in. So get up to the sign and read them. You might find something that's informative that lets you in. Of course, in today's world, you almost have to assume somebody can see you, somebody's watching you. There's Tony stuck out in the field, getting ready to take a picture, and here comes this guy, like lots of questions, lots and lots of questions, even more questions. But you know what? Tony did the right thing. He was humble. He was pleasing. He was very polite, answered all his questions, probably told him a couple of dumb jokes. And before you knew it, they probably had a beer together. But yeah, that's accessing. So, and even if you do come up to a property where there are fences and no trespassing signs, you have right of ways, public property, public areas where you can photograph from. So here's this, we saw the Google satellite image of this church. This is the Lignite Church. And it's definitely marked off, fenced off. It's actually a horse corral. The lady stores her horses in there. She keeps them in that blue barn, but the church is on the property now. But we go right up to the fence, and why not? It's okay. She actually showed up. She came, and I don't know where she came from. There's nothing else out there. You can look at that ridge line in the background. That's about 6 miles away, and in all directions, it's flat and nothing. And she like, oh, I saw you guys. So I thought you were hunters. I came out and checked you out. It's like, where did you see us from? So you never know. We were out in the middle of nowhere. But anyway, so that's accessing, just you guys can, you're all grown up. You can do the thing, do whatever you want. But I would be very leery about going on properties that's posted because people are just kind of crazy right now. Is John Roush in this group? Maybe. Is he part of the garden? No, that's John back there. If you couldn't tell by the gait in his step, this is a shot from North Dakota. We were in an insane asylum. It used to be a federal smallpox campus, about 12 buildings. This is one of our fun stops. But I like this shot. John's getting ready to walk into this really, really dark corridor between the 2 hospitals. And, he was getting ready to pull his big flashlight out, but safety, to me, this is a fun shot for safety. One of the things when you're exploring abandoned buildings, you really need to pay attention to your footwear. One of the very first times I was in an abandoned building, I stepped on a nail, a screw. It went right through my Keen hiking boots, right up, would have been right into my foot, except it literally went right between 2 toes to the point where I didn't even know I stepped on it until I picked my foot up to walk and the board came with me. So when you're in buildings like this, you want to have some pretty heavy duty footwear, or really, really pay attention to where you're stepping. And that's hard to do because the floors in these places are super cluttered. Flip-flops, tennis shoes, you're just waiting for an accident to happen. I would, get some kind of good boot to begin with. So also, if it's not cold, you still might want to wear some light gloves, maybe some cotton gardening gloves. And the main reason for that is you're setting your tripod down, you're probably doing some bracketing or some HDR, and the floor in these places are disgusting. I mean, it's, there's animal garbage and animal feces and bacteria and all that. First thing you do is you start to fold up your tripod and you grab it, you collapse it from the bottom and you just put your hand in it. So gloves are a good thing. It's just a good idea to protect yourself from all that nasty stuff. Just because a building is standing doesn't mean the floors are safe. A couple of things you want to be concerned with is when you first get into a building and you're not sure, you've never been there before, is stay around the wall. Stay close to those outside walls and stay until you start feeling how solid that floor is. You know, when you start feeling that the floor is not giving it all, you feel like wandering out a little bit, you know, at least do it slowly, feel it. I mean, you know, I know it's common sense, but you'd be surprised. I've seen people go right through the front door, right to the staircase and walk right across a large room. And they're lucky they didn't end up in the basement. Carpeting, especially, you don't know what's underneath that carpeting. Could be hiding rotted wood, softwood, spongy wood. So just, you know, step lightly and give it some weight and, you know, test it out. Or if there's somebody on the trip with you don't like, send them in first and just get it over with, you know. That's what we did a couple of times. It's fun. Stairs, the same thing. You know, I love photographing the stairs. I like climbing the stairs. Stay to the edges. Don't go up the dead center of those stairs because that's usually where they'll start to rot and give. So stay to the edges and you got a better chance of safety. All right. So the buddy system, you know, once in a while, I find myself exploring by myself. It's not because I want to, it just, you know, something I was out, maybe, you know, traveling back from a commercial shoot and I took the back roads and I see a place. You know, the first thing I do is I take a screenshot of where I am on the map and I send it to a friend of mine. I say, hey, I'm here. It's 7:27. If you don't hear from me by 8:30, call a sheriff. Okay. Why is that? Well, because who knows what's there? You know, I could fall, I could get hurt. I could land on something that, you know, pokes a kidney. You know, I told you I was going to share a tragic story. In December of 2019, a guy up in Saskatchewan was out and he was doing some, I guess he's pretty well known for his abandoned photography, did some cool stuff. Well, he fell into a 3-foot wide well. He fell about 18, 20 feet and he died. I mean, that's tragic. Would they have found him, you know, if he was missing only an hour, only 2 hours, maybe? Who knows? They didn't say if he died in the fall or if he died from exposure, but either way, he didn't have a buddy. There was nobody looking for him. He fell down that hole and that was it. And unfortunately, he paid a big price for that. So, you know, if you got a buddy, see if they come with you. If they're not a photographer, then, you know, buy them ice cream and have them sit in the car while you're there, you know, and again, tell them you're going to be back in an hour, back in a half an hour. The other thing you want to make sure you do, and it's really kind of smart, you start getting in these rural areas, check your cell service before you start exploring. You know, not everybody gets, you know, 3 bars, 4 bars, 5 bars. So make sure you've got cell phone before you start, you know, taking some gambles. Maybe your gamble is a little less because your service is kind of weak. So pay attention to that. And like I mentioned earlier, if you have to communicate with somebody offsite to tell them where you are, I used to do that a lot in Southern Illinois when I was learning the area for my October workshop. I would call the cabin owners and just say, hey, I'm going to, you know, Fern Cliff and I'm going to take the trail that heads wherever. And I'm going to be there for about 2 hours. And they're like, oh, okay, great. Have fun. And I says, I'll call you when I get back, you know, and we used to do stuff like that. So these are all good plans. It's, you know, safety is no accident. I didn't coin that phrase, but I steal it a lot. Okay. Last but not least, common sense. Okay. You guys have been around the world a few times. Use your common sense. You know, if the spider senses are tingling, there's a reason for that. You know, when we get into an area we're exploring, we want to stay a little hyped up and a little excited because that keeps our heart rate pumping and our adrenaline going, and we're more in tune to our surroundings. You know, don't go in there with headphones on, listening to, you know, AC/DC, Back in Black, and, you know, start slamming your arms in the air because you're radically cool. Just have a good time, make good decisions. Any questions on safety? What if, how comes, why nots? Maybe? No? All right. How about the photographic approach? Since you're all photographers, I'm assuming you're in a camera club. This is a grain elevator, a 1-story grain elevator. So I don't know if that's more of an escalator, but it's a grain elevator from like the late 1800s. And the little building to the left behind it, that's the corn crib. So I guess corn takes naps. So, oh, my mistake. Weather's next. Then we'll get into the photographic approach. Nothing much about weather. These are the apps that I use. Everybody's got their own. As a former aviator in the military, weather was kind of important to me. So I learned a little bit. I forgot a lot, I'm sure. But I do find that Weather Underground, the one top row middle, they seem to be pretty much, I wouldn't say spot on because none of them are, but I tend to agree with what I read there. I find them to be pretty accurate. And then when I really want to watch the weather, I watch it on my radar, the one to the right. That one gives me a really nice picture, and I like it a lot. And I'm excited about it. And it's just good. It's good. The other one, WeatherBug, that's there when I'm trying to scratch in my head and I just want to back it up and say, well, really? That doesn't look right. Let me see what the other guys say. And then the WeatherBug. And those three on the top row, those are kind of like meteorology for novices. Clear Outside and YR, that's like meteorologist stuff. There's good information there, but it could spin your head a little bit. But I did use it a couple of times to get out of a jam, so it's good stuff. The other thing that we use too is we check out our sun and our moon locations. And you guys probably know about this app, right? The Photographer's Ephemeris. That's a great app. And I think it's still free, but maybe not, or maybe partially free. And maybe you got to subscribe. It was like $8 something. It was cheap. I enjoy it. I use this one a lot. It's pretty fast and easy to use. The learning curve was maybe a half an hour of playing around with it, figuring it all out. And it's great for looking at sun angles. This is a big, deep canyon down in Southern Illinois. And just southeast of that red pin is a place called Devil's Backbone. And the sun only hits it for about an hour. So I like to line that sun up just right. And so we go down to Bell Smith Springs and line that sun up, and the Photographer's Ephemeris is really nice for that. Of course, the yellow lines are the sun, the blue lines are the moon, and it's nice for checking that out. And sun and moon is important too. If you're going to do some maybe ruins in the foreground while you're doing an eclipse or something crazy with this, the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, or the Milky Way, that's all a lot of fun. So it's still, you're kind of doing ruins, but you want to know where your light sources are because it could really affect your shot. The other one that's out there is PhotoPills. And PhotoPills is kind of like Photographer's Ephemeris on ultra steroids. This app is amazing, but the learning curve, I still haven't learned it. In fact, almost every time I go to use it, I have to go back to their website and watch a tutorial because it's loaded with information and I remember it as soon as I watch the tutorial, but it's just not as intuitive as the Photographer's Ephemeris, but way more data. Oh my gosh, way more data. It'll blow you away with the amount of things you could do. And that in itself could be a 2-hour class. So I'm not going to go any farther than that, but it'll help you with a lot of cool stuff. And then we also used to check our foregrounds and backgrounds with Google Maps. We talked about that. So, we want to know our weather. We want to know our light sources. We want to know what's going to be around us, any obstacles, which end are we coming from based on sun, based on moon? Is there a silo in the way? Is there a McDonald's in the way? These are all things that are all part of the pre-flight planning, if you will. What's going to happen first? What's going to happen next? And then off you go. Obstacles could be pretty annoying, but we can get around them with lenses, right? So you saw this shot already, and it looked like it could be a pretty cool, grandiose shot with that leading line, the 2-rut trail going up to the church. But then you got those beautiful, beautiful aluminum buildings there that house the horses and the power lines, So I saw a lot of photographers grab their 70 to 200 and just the heck with that. I'm just going to zoom in. So that's an easy way, right? Get rid of an obstacle. But you can get rid of obstacles many, many ways. One of the things that I did is after these guys were down here shooting, there's two more to the left you can't see. By the way, does anybody recognize the guy on the left edge? Oh, you're all looking. What's his hat say? I don't know what his hat says. I don't know if he's in your club or not, but you might recognize his name if I told you. All right, I'll tell you, Rich Fisher. So anyway, right here where I'm standing, those of you who are fairly handy in Photoshop or just dabble a little bit, you can see how easy it's going to be to clear that building out because it's right at that ridge line. And so, and that's going to a little bit of a segue into our next section, but you know, look at this and say, well, geez, look, if I just come back up the hill, you know, get out of the ditch, then I changed my angle enough. I'm not going to have these weird stuff in the sky. I can just clone from that far right edge and go all the way across, and you won't even notice that I did that. And that's what I did. And then I kind of said, hey, by the way, guys, check this out. And they came back up the hill and they're like, oh, now you tell us. So that's right. We let you learn. This is one of the things that I started getting way better at once I really felt comfortable with software. You know, I'm a film shooter from way back in the day. In studio, we used to shoot the Hasselblad and the 4x5 crew, you know, view cameras and all that stuff. And so there wasn't a lot of post-production. So, you know, I used to read, you know, when I was learning this stuff in the back of the magazines or in the front of the magazines, they're talking about, you know, you got to visualize the shot before you even think about taking it. And I used to look at people like three-headed dragons, like, how do I visualize something I haven't taken yet? But once I started getting more comfortable with software and learning what bracketing can do for me and learning what, you know, HDR is, and I started seeing images or setting up my images as I saw them in my head. It's like, wait a second, if I do this or if I do that, maybe, okay, you know, and I just start thinking through the shot, then I take it instead of just spray and pray. So this is a shot we got, and I'm looking at this shot and I didn't like it. That hay bale is just kind of out there on the left. It's grabbing my eye away. It's blocking the horizon. And so I like, okay, I don't like this. I'm going to move a little bit. And so I moved over to the left. I kept going, kept walking. And that hay bale, oh, and I went farther backwards a little bit too, to get a little more head on. But now the hay bale kind of blends in. The picture's got a little bit of flow to it. Of course, I went and made it look old timey. But that's just me, you know, but I kind of saw this as I was approaching the shot, you know, and I was talking out loud to the few people that were walking with me. And I was talking to about underexposing the sky, you know, maybe 2 stops, because there's layers in that sky. Our eye is only seeing a bright white sky, but, you know, do a little bit of underexposing, break those layers out. And that's one of the weird things about North Dakota that we don't get here. It seems like in Chicago, our lowest layer of clouds is usually our thickest layer. Even if it's only 3,000-4,000 feet thick, it's a light blocker when we get overcast. But for some reason, somewhere north of Madison, it seems to change. You get in northern Minnesota, northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota. It seems like their overcast layers are very broken, and combined, they make an overcast layer. So you still don't see the sun. But when you photograph them, maybe 2 stops dark, maybe 3 stops dark, suddenly your sky is filled with tones that you don't see with your own eye. So keep that in mind too when you are shooting on overcast skies. You might get away with it in Chicago once in a while. I don't know if the lake has anything to do with it, but the skies are awesome, even overcast. So I just threw that out there. All right, so where was I? So visualizing the shot, I already wanted, because of the age of the building, and it's hard to see in this picture, but they put colored paper, I think, in the belfry. So there's a red one, a blue one, a green one. There's no light behind them, but you could see the colors. And I thought, oh, you know what? I want to make this black and white anyway, because they were distracting to me. So visualize it, something to see. Here's another one that we approached. I called this one No Steeple, No People. This was a church that we found, just Tony and I found this one just wandering around after we left the place we were looking for. And this guy, bought this church after they closed it, and he moved it onto his cow pasture for storage. And I have no idea what happened to the steeple. He actually came up to us 2 trips later, but I never did get to ask him because there was a storm coming, and he just wanted to make sure we weren't broke down on the side of the road. But anyway, so I'm looking at this picture, and you've heard what I said about the clouds. I knew there'd be some cool stuff about the clouds here. And so I was thinking, all right, so I need to shoot dark for the clouds, which is going to kill my foreground. And I really don't want to lose that cow. I want to get that cow. I like the cow. He would not stop looking at me, or she, I don't know, couldn't tell. It's too far away to look under the hood. But I'm trying to figure out what I got here. I knew that this was definitely going to be a bracketed shot. And so I started shooting, 3, 4, 5 shots. I'm not going to show all of them, but what I did here is this is basically 2 stops under, dead on, and probably 1 or 2 stops over. And of course, that's what bracketing is. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, but you can see how the sky starts to pop in the dark one, but I lose a lot of detail. The cow is almost a silhouette. So I had to go to the foreground to the bright image, and of course, combine them together. And I really, really wanted this to be like a black and white. I liked all the texture in the building and in the grass. I knew there was going to be cool details in the sky. So for me, I'm visualizing this again, either sepia or black and white. And when I finally put it all together and did a little bit of burning and dodging, I came out with this, and I was pretty stoked. I liked it. I had a good time with it. The angry sky is there, and it's not super angry sky. If you go back and look, it's just thicker. The clouds are just thicker there. There's no storm, but boom, the little magic of Lightroom. Lightroom's got some fabulous tools. That paintbrush tool is amazing, and there's so many YouTube videos how to use the paintbrush tool in Lightroom. I suggest watching a few of them and practicing and pausing it and go doing stuff with it. It's especially the auto mask part of it. That's just woohoo! I love it. So play with that. Here's another one. So this is by the way, this is the house for the guy in Ryder that we went and found. This is the year before. He didn't have any signs up. So Tony and I were all over this property. There's a piano in this house. We had a blast with that. And that's why we wanted to go back there with the group. But the following year, there was a sign up. So we're kind of bummed. But, so here we are. I'm trying to remember why this is so backlit by the sky. I think the cloud layer was just moving in, and it was super backlit. And so once again, I was hoping there'd be layers in the sky. So I shot it dark. Then I wanted to get some really nice leading lines from our trimmed up wheat. And then, of course, the texture in the building, again, I didn't want to lose any of that. So here we go, bracketing again. 2 under, 1 on, and 2 over, probably here. I'll be honest though, and I'll talk about it later. I rarely bracket only 3 images. I just don't like it. The other thing about this image is this was kind of a sad image to me. Not sad. I mean, sad, like emotionally, somebody used to live here, that we parked in the driveway, and, it hasn't been mowed in a while, and the house is pretty good size. The cedar was in pretty good shape, but the roof's a mess. The barn was already collapsed. It's kind of a sad scene. So I didn't want to make it all bright and cheerful and say, oh yeah, let's change this. So when I got done with it, it kind of had this this kind of a solemn, kind of dark, kind of a rainy day, sad kind of a look to it. But the one thing that I really liked was how the detail in that wood just popped. And that's, part of bracketing, part of HDR, and I loved it. So it came up better than I visualized it. I was hoping that the rows of wheat, even though they turn away from the subject, that they still act good enough for leading lines. You're not going to keep staring at them until your eyes fall off to the right side. You're going to follow the rows up and hit the rooftop. So now this one shot does contradict something I'm going to talk about later, but I want to explain it now. I shot this straight on. I don't usually shoot a house or any building straight on, but the other side of the building, the siding, I don't know if somebody took it down, but it was just paper. It was black paper and it just looked ugly. And there was enough three-dimensional going on with the trees behind it, the coop in the back and the rows, that I shot it straight on anyway. So later on, when I talk about don't do that, you're going to say, you hypocrite. I'm explaining why. It's not a rule. It's more of a suggestion. All right. Tony has a word. He calls it the diva. I still call it the subject, but I like some people respond to the diva better as we start realizing what's going on here. You walk up to a place like this and you really have two subjects, right? I mean, I cropped some of the foreground and the sky out, but basically, like, which building do I look at? Do I look at the one on the left, the one on the right? Which one's the house? I don't know what to look at here. It's okay. It's a record shot, but it's not a thrilling shot. So the first thing you got to really think about is just crop one of the two out and go to town on that one. This ain't the, oh my God, knockdown, drag down, oh my God, great shot. But it's at least now you know where to look. In the last shot, you may not even notice that tree in the foreground, in the middle between the two buildings, because there's two buildings in the way. But now as you're flowing, right, we read left to right. Now you see this big busted up tree. It partially fell into the front of the house. That is the house, by the way. Although the crazy thing is the part with no roof, that's where all the beds were. So I'm not sure what blew the roof off, but that was that. But you need to make sure that when you are photographing your ruins, whether it's something inside, something outside, you make it really clear what's your diva, who's your subject, what's your subject. You just remember the diva never shares the stage. Okay, so there's a good one. So inside, here's a good one. This is inside a living room, and there's a lot to look at here. I mean, there's a beam of light coming in. You got your trim line, Harvest Gold phone. Carlos, you probably still have one of those in your office, right? Yeah, those are great. You can bang on the desk, they still work. But as shot, the brightest thing is that armrest. But that, to me, that's not what caught my eye, but that's what the camera saw. And then that hose on the right-hand side, I don't know if it's a vacuum hose or whatever, it's just distracting. But I took the shot anyway, and this was almost all post-production. I went in, did some selective burning, dodging, a little bit of cropping. Now there's no doubt what my subject is. It's that photo. It's like, my gosh, these people left this house in such a hurry, they forgot their photos. I can't fathom that. They left their trim line phone and they left their photos. And then the insulation that's fallen out of the hole in the roof was falling on the picture, and it just looks like a nest. So it's kind of a little nasty there. But at least now you know what my subject is, because vignetting is your friend. And if you just grab, like in Lightroom, and you do that edge vignetting, that's nice. But you check out the radial tool that's in Lightroom. So if you're not sure where that is, that's up in the right, up in the top. It's kind of by the paintbrush tool. It's a little circle. Again, YouTube, how to use the radial tool in Lightroom. It'll blow you away what you could do with that thing. Change the feather, change the size, change the shape, oblong, circles, you name it. It's a great friend of vignetting, and you can do multiple vignettes in a photo that, especially like a scenery shot, you could actually walk somebody through a photo by selective radial tool vignetting. You heard it here second. All right. My favorite subject. Not really. Here's a funny story. 2 years ago, well, actually it was a year ago, last March, right before everybody got shut down, I was asked to do this presentation at the Florida Council something, FCCCCCCC. It was like F5C squared or something. It was a great time. We enjoyed it. They put me in the room right after the keynote speaker, and the keynote speaker's topic was, there's no such thing as rule of thirds, don't waste your time. And of course, I come in with this, and here we go. the rule of thirds. So it's not a rule. I just didn't feel like changing the type to the suggestion of thirds, but I'll let you guys decide. There's some mathematicians out there that say it's important and everybody should use it, and they've got proof. That's way outside of my brain power, but it does work. I'll give you an example. All right, this is your typical new photographer, right? They're in North Dakota for the first time, and here we show them this 170-year-old church that's leaning away, and they put it right smack dab in the center of the picture. The horizon, top to bottom, right? It's almost perfectly centered. It's not a bad picture, and you can crop it later if you wanted to, but typically when your subject is just smack dab in the middle and there's other things in the photo to look around, your viewer doesn't do that because they just zero in and they're stuck. Granted, there's nothing else in this picture because it is North Dakota, but when you do a few things like using that 1/3 grid and say, okay, well, what if I decide to move it a little left and a little down? Okay, so now you do that. And, oh, hey, look, there's a leading line. There's a road bringing me across the image now that I didn't even notice or pay attention to there. But now I got a road, I got a little fence row on the right, simple things pop in. And now, left to right, right to left. Now I know, we read left to right. So I hear a lot, if you're going to have leading lines and you're going to start at one side or the other, see if you can start them from the left because we read left to right. Yeah, I've gone around that argument a few times. I even flipped a few pictures, but somebody busted me because the signs were backwards. But whatever. So in this shot, at least, if there was a better sky, I might leave it this way. But nice, beautiful day in North Dakota, big blue sky. You can see forever and a day. So I decided I'm going to do this instead. Now I couldn't take the horizon all the way to the top of the 1/3 line because then that cross would have been too close to the edge. And, that's just not what we want. We want a little bit of space. But now, yeah, it's just grass, but we do have a road. We got a little bit of a leading line. The road kind of wanders to the right, and then it picks up again and goes farther in the distance. The sky is not exciting, so let's make that 1/3. The ground has something going on. Let's make that 2/3. Our building's off to the left. Our road comes in from the right. There's motion in this picture. The picture does have some balance. And that's where the rule of 1/3 or the rule of thirds kind of helps you, because it helps you steer the viewer's eyes as they're coming in. And then the only other thing I did to this shot, just to kind of clean it up a little bit, is I got rid of those posts, right? See the posts? Because they really weren't serving any purpose in the picture. They didn't help. They distracted a little bit. So taking that shot from just dead center to this, it's just, at least to me, maybe some of you agree, maybe you do the same thing. It's a little more artistically pleasing. But you know what? You're the artist. You're the maker. Do what you want. That's the suggestion of thirds, maybe not the rule of thirds. There's a guy who's a keynote, so obviously must know way more than everybody else that spoke there, that spent 90 minutes telling us why the rule of thirds is dumb. So I didn't actually listen because I was having, well, not me personally, the room I was on the back side of the wall trying to get my PowerPoint to work. Their connectors were dead. So I wanted to hear the guy actually, but I didn't get to hear it. But I had a helper who sat through it. He came by, he goes, oh yeah, he told us all about the rule of thirds and why we don't need to use it. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I asked for a show of hands. Okay, who was listening to so-and-so? And like 80% of the room went up. What are you gonna do? Can't win. Angles and flow kind of ties in with rule of thirds. That picture, by the way, is just completely made up. It means absolutely nothing. I was just scribbling one day, came up with that. But this is the part where I talk about don't shoot straight on. This shot is rescued a little bit because we got some cool sky. But this is just cell phone shot. So I don't know what's the iPhone 8 was, like a 20 millimeter, I think. So not super wide, but wide enough. And because of the streaks in the sky, it actually gave the picture a little bit of life, a little bit of dimension. But you know what? when you look at this building from the side, it's even nicer now. I mean, this is some guy's little mini barn. I don't know what it is. All stone, looks cool. Now you can get some depth to it. In the shot before, you didn't even see there was a cupola on top, and now you get to see that. The vent, with the weather vane that probably blew off in their 90-mile-an-hour winds they get in the wintertime. Why do people live in North Dakota? I don't understand it, but maybe it's the scenery. I don't know, but don't shoot straight on if you can't, or if you're like me, maybe some of you do real estate photography for a realtor. You got to work from one corner to the other. One of those shots is going to be dead on. It may not be the shot, and rarely is the shot picked, but every once in a while you get lucky. So try to get an angle. Here's another one. So I was extremely limited how far I could back up. So I've got my, what did I have? A 14? I think I rented maybe a 16 to something else. But by the time I did the perspective control in Photoshop, I lost the entire edges of the shot, but at least the building is straight. This is almost like a 4.5-story building because it's so tall that when I lean my camera and I'm looking up, the building looks like it's leaning backwards. So, as you know, you could fix that in Photoshop, perspective and perspective control, but it has to crop part of the picture out. And sure enough, I got what looks like a bookmarker now. I mean, yet to me, the picture's kind of boring. It doesn't do much. We're about 8 miles from the Canadian border. Not that you know that in this picture, but I don't think that shot does this building any service, or any justice. But hey, it's not changing. There we go. Take 25 steps to the right, turn back around, take the shot. Woohoo. I could have really liked this shot. And if I was one of those guys who doesn't like to spend more than 5 minutes on a picture, I'd get rid of those trees. But I don't know. I don't want to spend forever on a photo. I have too much work to do. But now you see the whole building, 35 to 45 degrees off from the front. You get your depth, you get your sight. It's not leaning as bad. Yes, I still had to do a little bit of perspective control. I shot it, on the horizontal view, just like I shot this one on the horizontal view. But look how much I lost in perspective control. I have a lot more here to play with. So, get off to the corners, get some depth in there. The other nice thing is when you're looking at, when you want to, you could put that front corner and keep that front corner perfectly vertical. And now your shot's balanced and the whole building is correctable when you use your perspective control. Anybody else seeing blue lines on their screen? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, what is that?
Somebody's got a pencil and they're drawing.
Oh,
That's okay. I don't mind. It's just kind of fun. It's like we got an E-worm. I like E-worms. I just don't like them in my soup. All right, so here's a house that could have been cool, and flat on, it's boring. Yeah, there's good texture. There's some colors going on in the leaves, but it's like, if I just moved to the right, I lost the shot because of that ugly tree, but I kept going all the way around the house to the opposite side. And here now, again, a 45, you get to see, the house. And this was a beautiful house at one time. The inside of this house was amazing. Just, it had a look-through china cabinet, which was really cool. The wall between the kitchen and the dining room was a china cabinet, and it had glass doors on both sides. And so talk about, framing up a shot and setting up the picture. It's just really cool. But that's not what this was all about. This is all about abandons and ruins. So, but the room above the porch was the master bedroom, and they donated it to the raccoons. Boy, did it stink up there. Whew. But beautiful house back in its day. So composition, anyway, when it comes to these old buildings, give yourself some angles. Get off left, get off right, get some 30 to 45 degrees off the corners, and I think you'll like the depth better. I think you'll like the textures better. In bright light, you might find a shadow side, gives the house even more depth. That's where your bracketing comes in, maybe overexpose that side a little bit. So when you blend it, you get some detail. But, flat on, I don't know, doesn't do much for me. But you're the maker, do what you want. All right, so I'm gonna regress just a little bit for some of you guys. I know a lot of you guys know how to bracket, you know how to read a light meter, but I said bracketing a bunch of times, and for somebody out there, maybe there's somebody in this group who doesn't really know how bracketing looks or what it looks like in your light meter. So if you're looking through your camera, by the way, this is where you pro guys go to sleep a little bit. Just make sure you're on mute. I don't want to hear you. So as you look through your camera, you've got your light meter across the bottom. And if you're doing everything right, or let's say you're using an automatic, then your light meter bar is going to be at plus or minus 0. And, depending on which metering, whether you're using evaluative or center weighted or spot, you're going to have a pretty decent picture because it's, you're plus or minus 0. That used to be the goal back in the day with our film cameras, right? Of course, this means your picture is 1 f-stop overexposed, which means you let in twice as much light as the light meter was telling you to, right? So 1 f-stop, 1 stop, double the amount of light. Where the opposite is in the other direction. If you're at 1 under, then you cut your light in half, so your picture is going to be darker. All right. Well, bracketing says, well, I'm going to do it in this example. I'm going to take 5 pictures. And because I don't want to shoot, me personally, don't want to shoot a full f-stop apart, I only want to shoot 2/3 of an f-stop apart. This is kind of what my light meter looks like. I'll have the 1 shot in the middle. My 3rd picture will be dead on to the light meter. I'll have my darkest picture will be 1 1/3 too dark. My next picture will be 2/3 of a stop too dark. My 3rd shot will be dead on. My 4th shot will be 2/3 overexposed. And my final shot will be 1 1/3 overexposed. And I'll have 5 identical images going from dark to light. When I bring them up into Lightroom or my software, I'll see them in my film strip. So somebody's going to ask me, so I'll say, why do I only do 2/3 instead of a full stop? Probably today it's not as critical, but early on when some of the software, that HDR software was coming out, the bigger the spread, the more you got the crazy halos and ugly HDR looks, and the picture just looks so HDR. So I would rather take 15 pictures at only 2/3 apart rather than take 6 pictures at 3 stops apart because they didn't process as well. Today's software is better. I actually recently started using the Aurora program from Skylum, but I still use the FX Pro that's part of Nik software as well. And I like them both a lot, but it's an old habit and I stick with it because it's always worked for me. And so this is kind of how it would look when I pull them up on the screen. So here's another thing too. If those of you who like to do, HDR or bracketing at sunrise or sunset, to really burn in those nice, rich sky colors, I don't start at plus or minus 0 and have equal number of shots dark and equal number of shots bright. I'll start sometimes as far as 2 stops underexposed on my dead on shot, so I'm telling my camera to auto compensate 2 stops dark. So in this example, I really only went 2/3 dark, but my first shot now is 2 2/3 instead of just 1 2/3. So I moved it and it works good. I get this little bar, my top left corner, all you see is the yellow on the horizon. But then as it keeps getting brighter and brighter, now there's only two images in this whole sequence of 7 that are overexposed, because all I'm really overexposing is I'm giving the sensor some foreground that I'm going to pull out later in post-processing. I don't want to rich the sky up anymore. I got actually the second one in from the right on the top row. That's the sky I really want. I know there's more in there, but the other three are more for the foreground that because of the horsepower of shooting raw, I know there's something else I can pull out of it. So here's kind of what it looks like, simplified mathematically. I went from 2 2/3 underexposed all the way to only 1 1/3 overexposed. But that range of bracketing, those 7 shots gave me a lot to play with. Okay. So that's what I ended up with in the HDR program before I went back into Lightroom and played with the foreground. And then that's the final image. And all I did between this and this is I used that paintbrush tool in Lightroom. I made sure the auto mask is on. I slid the texture bar a little to the right, maybe to 10, maybe to 12. And then I just lightened the exposure and I brought the shadows up a third of the way. And I just started coloring in on the building. And then I gave myself a little path in the foreground to bring my eye up from the ground, from the bottom of the picture up to the building, but I didn't touch the sky at all. And using that auto bracket is just phenomenal. And, and I really liked the way this picture came out. And, that's the power of RAW, man. I love shooting in RAW. There's so much horsepower. There's so much data there that those of you that think you're saving yourself memory card space shooting on JPEG, it's not worth it. Shoot in RAW, let your programs do the work for you. So anywho, any questions on bracketing? I know I kind of blew through it kind of fast, but before we get into another phase here, is there anybody, hold the space bar down, ask a question or unmute yourself. I'd like to answer it for you as best I can, if I can.
Anybody?
Anybody?
Yeah, it's something, going back a little bit, you're talking about radar apps. There's another radar app that goes on the phone. It used to cost $9.99 for lifetime. A lot of people use it, really more for meteorologists and storm chasers, but it's called Radar Scope. Some of you may have heard of it. Or you may to look it up. Now, this My Radar, I'm not familiar with that one. Say the Radar Scope does cost money, but it gives you the full, and I mean the complete rendition from the radar side, all the different levels, all the different radar products that the radar is generating. There's several dozen. It is geared more for a storm chaser or meteorologist. Just for a photographer, I would say if that My Radar app is all you really need just to know where the rain is, that would be fine. One of the things that Radar Scope also will give you is any warnings in the area. So if you're out there, you got storms approaching and there's a warning, the Radar Scope ad will show, the Radar Scope app will also show the warning.
Very cool.
Cool. I
Scope.
I have a question about bracketing.
Yeah, cool.
I noticed that, well, you were talking about shooting it darker. I noticed you've got your bracket set up and you can make it darker by either playing with the shutter speed, right? You're shooting on manual because the bracket makes it darker by slowing down or speeding up the shutter speed, lighter and darker. So if you just turn the shutter dial to darker, it will make the shot, it will move the whole bracket over in that direction. But you can also use the exposure compensation dial and do the same thing. Do you have a preference for which one you use?
I like the exposure compensation because on my Sony, it's right on top of the camera body and I don't have to push any other dials. I just spin it. And I know counterclockwise, I'm making it lighter, and clockwise, I'm making it darker. And I can go all the way to ±4. So I like that. Otherwise, if I am shooting an aperture priority, which I do a lot when I'm in the field, regardless of what I'm photographing, then you can just, on the Canons, you just take your thumb wheel and just, as soon as you tap the shutter button and spin your thumb wheel, you're moving your exposure compensation that way. So that used to be pretty easy as well. I found it easier when I was in one of the priority modes to just use an actual exposure compensation dial. Now, there were times when I was shooting more photos, numbers of photos in the bracketing sequence than my camera was set up to do automatically. For instance, when I was still shooting Canon, I think we can go up to 7 if we went into the custom functions and set it up that way. In the Sony, it'll do 3 shots, 5 shots, or 9 shots, but not 7, which I find that a little weird. But in some incredibly extreme lighting conditions, especially on interiors with bright light outside a window, I might want to shoot 9 to maybe 16 pictures, maybe 17 pictures, 2/3 apart. So then I have to go into a more manual mode and set it up that way. So.
Yeah, another way that you can do that is on your preset dial. I have one for like outdoor HDR shots, and then I have one for indoor HDR shots, which is a brighter, exposure. And then if I'm in a situation, I can go like, well, first I'll take the brighter one. Now I'll switch to 2, and now I'll take the darker one.
Right,
the brighter one, and then just add all of those. You're on a tripod, so it doesn't move, and then you can blend all 10 of them, afterwards.
Yeah. And the software today is way more forgiving when you start pumping in that much data than it was, even 5 years ago. So I am a pretty big fan of bracketing and some of the HDR, but I don't want them to look overcooked. That drives me nuts. It's not my genre. I know some people love it and they do it a lot, and that's the way they want it to look, and that's okay. But I want it to look like I saw it, period. And so I actually did some reading up on a photographer who was a ophthalmologist and a research ophthalmologist. And supposedly, and I don't know how he proved this, supposedly the human eye has about a 200 f-stop range. Think that through for a second. I don't know how, but maybe between what our eye can do and what our brain does, we can see into the darkest, deepest shadows and look right into something really bright and grab data, instantaneously. So crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I heard we can see like 1 photon in a dark room. Our eyes can actually see that.
But, night vision takes about 30 minutes to really acquire full night vision, and in a cigarette lighter to ruin it. They actually showed us samples of that in the military, and it blew your mind. You didn't get your depth of field because they actually did it to us. There was a guy who lit a cigarette, and we are supposed to guess how far out he was. He ended up being 180 yards away. We thought he was about 50 feet away. So, don't light a cigarette up in a firefight at night.
Nope,
All right.
no good idea. Makes you a target.
Yeah, right. So if there's no more questions about
I
bracketing.
got a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
You talked about auto masking.
Yes.
in Lightroom.
Yes.
Where is that?
It's on the develop tool. And when you click on the paintbrush, a new slider on the right, it'll look like a drop down opens up, and closest to near the bottom, there's just a little checkbox. And it just says auto mask.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Isn't that cool?
And now that you can set the brightness you want, and then it'll mask out the other stuff.
So what it does is it's think about when you're masking, and it kind of finds the edges. So like in the shot that's on the screen now, if I was in the paintbrush tool and I was painting on the corn crib, that if my little brush went over the edge of the corn crib into the sky, it wouldn't mask there. It would leave that edge alone. It stays into the edge. It takes a little practice, but it's just amazing. Like I say, do a couple of YouTube searches on using the paintbrush tool and auto mask, and you'll find that it speeds up your post processing and does a really nice job at the same time.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the range mask. If you right below that, you'll see once you paint it on your photo, you'll see that range mask becomes available, and then you can pick a luminosity or a color range mask, and then it only affects that range of colors or lightnesses
Yeah.
that you select with the
Right.
sliders. And
Yeah,
that's-
believe it or not, I haven't actually figured that one out all the way yet. I think that was an update in the last year or so. And
Where's
I
that
think-
range mask?
it's right below that auto mask, but you have to, it doesn't show up as available until you've actually painted on your photo, okay, with the brush. Then it goes pop, then, oh, now I can select it.
pretty cool stuff.
There was a Lightroom virtual summit just like last week. And
Oh, okay.
the guy taught about, he went on and on about luminosity mask and color mask and how to really fly with those. It was awesome.
Yeah, they've put a lot of horsepower into that. I really like it. Anybody else with a question on the bracketing or anything we've talked to up to this point? Okay, well, oh, that's the wrong way. There we go. All right, so a lot of times, what I remember I was talking about, kind of visualizing the shot. This is that same church again. No steeple, no people. I'll look at these pictures and I'll look at the color. And it's a lot of times this is in post-production even, but even while I'm out there, I'm trying to think, okay, color or black and white? Do I like it better this way? Do I like it better? I don't know. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, some of the things that can kind of snap through on the color. Typically a shot if a good solid shot should hold its own weight in monochrome. But every once in a while, there's certain things that color just pulls out of the image, and so when I look at a shot like this, I love the sky. I love the tonal ranges in the sky. I don't know what that orangey red thing is on the right and the background. It kind of bothers me a little bit. The cow went back to eating. The little red horizon, and it's really weird to have a horizon red. You don't know this, but we're looking south. And so why is the southern sky red, in mid to late September? But it was. And so I liked it, but I thought, I think I'm going to like it better in black and white. And so I rarely shoot, or I shouldn't say shoot, I rarely process in straight black and white. I was always a huge fan of the Ilford warm tone papers when I had my darkroom in the camera store. And so I like to do some of these more warmed black and whites, especially when they're older, like an older subject like this. But to me, I've got great tonal range. I have a lot of nice things going on. The color doesn't really help the image. I don't know if it hurts it, but it doesn't help it. So this would have been one I would have stuck with and left it in black and white, and I'm like, woohoo, I like it. When you look at them side by side, you could, look at them however you want to look at them. They kind of each hold their own, but I like the sky better. When I processed it, I do process monochrome and color differently. I don't just finish it and then strip the color out because they rarely look good. I will process it from scratch, or at least from a certain point, flip it to black and white. And in this shot, to me, monochrome wins. But that's an opinion, right? Not a rule, just an opinion. So here's another building. We'll start in black and white. So here's a mess, right? We saw this shot earlier, if you remember. But this is just, there's a mess here. We got a barn falling over. We got some crazy sky. The sky's moving fast. You can see motion in the clouds, so the shutter is probably a little slow. There's some God rays in the background. but they almost get lost. They're just kind of a hot spot. Whatever's in the foreground, who knows? And so this shot is a little busy for monochrome. But just like the woman in the red dress, we got a building in a red dress. Let's hang it out there. And I like to me, now I've got color in the sky. It makes sense. I have color in the foreground. I have color in the background. And to me, there's a little nicer flow. The color actually helped my eye. I start out with what actually was a building that fell over sideways, and what now is horizontal boards used to be vertical boards. They just all fell over. So I like it better. Let's side by side. I like them both. And I've done this on Instagram a million times, put it out there for the vote. And it's funny. It's kind of half and half all the time, but it's okay. It's good for followers to comment. But I still liked the red better than the black and white. Again, just me. Now, if in a shot like this was on the second floor of a house. This is in the hallway between the bedrooms, and I was in love with the texture. I mean, there's texture everywhere on this dresser, and I really wanted to bring out that texture, but there's so much other color going on here. These deep blues and the green bedroom in the background, and the plaster falling off the wall on the right. That to me, if I really wanted to get my viewer to just concentrate, I need to get them in a monochromatic. And now you have a diva, and it's not sharing the stage. You don't even care that there's other rooms. There it is. There's your texture, and monochrome wins. Again, these are all my opinion, but they're my pictures, so I can say that. But that's kind of how I think through the process on, is it helping? Is it hurting? Is it indifferent? Did I visualize it this way anyway? You look at these two side by side and you're like, wow, that's blue. And that really was that color blue. It was crazy. But the reason that somebody moved this dresser out of a bedroom to that spot in the hallway is back when these old homes were built, they had a big boiler in the basement, and right above the boiler, they had a 2-foot by 2-foot grate, and the heat from the boiler would just come up through the floor. And then right above it in the ceiling was another 2-foot by 2-foot grate. And whatever heat was in the living room now went up into the upstairs rooms, and that's where all their heat came from. And so somebody put this over that grate because I think that there was a hole. So that would have hurt. Anyway, so monochrome versus color, I think that I like that a lot. There's other thoughts out there that every picture should be monochrome unless it needs to have help. I don't know. I love the power of monochrome. I love the detail of monochrome. I love the tonal range, but you know what? Sometimes color just does it for me. And so I like the colors too.
Keith, what's your process for this? Do you just pick a preset, or do you go in and play with the color mix like crazy?
So typically what'll happen first is I'll get about 2/3 of the way done with my tonal and my saturation likes as I shot it in color and in raw. And then I'll take this picture and I will bring it into Silver Effects. I guess it's just called Silver Effects. It's one of the Nik softwares, and I'll play around with presets. I'll look at them, but they're never all inclusive for me. I like them too much of this or not enough of that, so I'll still play with them. There's a few that I like on the warm tones that I start with the preset, and then I usually change the shadows and I change the contrast a lot more. But when I stay with a straight black and white like this one, I'll just start working my contrast and my highlights like I would if I was in the dark room, and I'd start looking at my contrast filters and and see what's bringing out the most depth and the most detail. And I kind of work at it that way. And then usually when I'm done with it in Silver Effects, the only other thing I might do back in Lightroom is either a corner to corner vignette or some selective vignetting with the radial tool. This picture didn't really need it, but other, scenery shots tend to need it a little bit. But does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Cool. There are some really cool presets, but I kind of feel like I'm stealing some from somebody else because they did all the work for that preset. But I've also saved some of my own early on and somehow managed to lose them. So now I just do them all by hand. So, right, rather than learn how to do them all again. Sky. All right, and this is kind of our last little segment, but the sky. Does it help? Does it hurt? Does it help colored more than it helps black and white? Here's that lignite church again, zoomed way in, a typical North Dakota sky. And this one's a toss-up. In my opinion, when I like it, normally I put a little more contrast in my monochrome. So this one's a little flat for me, but it might have got too hot in the clouds. The whites might have got too bright. So maybe I toned it back a little bit. But, if I look at one or the other, neither one of them like stands out as oh my God, that one's so much better. I like them both. They both kind of hit me. They move me kind of equally. So in this case, it doesn't help. It doesn't hinder. It's just the sky. It looks cool. I like it. Let's run with it. It's kind of, Montana, there's a lot of big skies. This shot though, I think the sky in black and white looks better than it does in color. It's not ugly in color, but because of the deep blues and some of the tools we have available, it almost gave us that infrared look. And now you've got this powerful black sky, the misty white clouds, and then it graduates. And this was not done intentionally. It just kind of happened that way because of the way the slider tools work and probably the contrast, but it went darker top to bottom. And so it's a nice gradual, almost like the top half of the shot was infrared. So in this case, the black and white sky helped better than the color sky as far as overall image. Again, just my opinion, but normally I wouldn't stop at a church that's been modernized and you're like, what do you mean modernized? Well, this one's got an aluminum roof on it. So to me, that's not the fun one, but across the street, you can't see it, was a really cool abandoned homestead. And I say was because last year when we're like, oh, hey, let's go. And I'm like, oh, there's a hole in the ground. So they bulldozed it and took away my homestead. So we may not be shooting this church anymore. But anyway, sky, help or hinder. All right, so now here's one that in black and white, it's very ominous looking. In color, it's just kind of gloomy, I don't know. Again, this one's a little bit of a toss up. This is where you as the viewer, you as the maker have to decide, play with this, play with that, move this, move that. But, the skies, this is, to the naked eye, these skies were just solid white. But, starting probably 4 stops under exposed on the bracketing, and we got multiple layers out of this sky, and it was moving kind of fast. So I probably ran the ISO way up so I didn't get blur in the sky. There's a little bit of blur, not too bad. But from a black and white, help or hinder, sky, help or hinder, I kind of like the black and white on this one again. The whole picture just has a mood to it, where in the color one, it's more of a scenery look around, kind of like, oh yeah, they died in 1904. Wow, okay. You're just kind of looking at it, where I think there's a little more impact, a little more punch to that black and white one. But again, just my opinion. All right, so here's one. And I don't know why I didn't do this intentionally, but I put I flip-flopped the color in black and white, left and right. I like the way when I started playing with contrast and shadow, the sky almost took this upside down ocean look. It almost looks like water flowing to me. There's a few more details came out in the monochrome that are there. Maybe they're there in the color, but they get absorbed or they get hidden or they get distracted by the blue sky. But it's just, again, I went to the monochrome. If you're going to start thinking I'm just a monochrome shooter, maybe I am. But, you know, there was a lot going on with this sky. It was moving fast. I remember this day. So this was a manual. When I say manual blend, the sky, I did one shot with the sky and then a bunch of HDR shots for the ground and the building because the grass was blowing too much. I didn't like the blurry grass. So it was all kinds of craziness going on here. But I broke my own rule. I probably spent 20 minutes on this picture. Sorry. Just suggestion. Anyway, so you guys can decide on that one again. Does this guy help in color? Does this guy help in black and white? Does this guy help the shot? Should I have, got up off the ground a little bit? We maybe shot this with a 70 to 200 and forget the sky altogether. You could say that about any of these shots. Uh-oh, what'd I do? Help me, Mr. Wizard. I don't want to be a photographer anymore. Let's go. That was the last slide, by the way.
So I wanted to, you said you did it like HDR of the foreground
Yeah.
in that last one, and then the sky was one shot. And what did you blend them in? Right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I just kind of manually blend them in.
Oh, like Photoshop layers, just
Yes.
layer mask. Okay.
This is crazy. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now because that was the last slide anyway. I don't know what I did, but
Keith,
hey, Rich.
how you doing?
Good.
Long time no see.
It's been a while.
As you show these images, I look at a couple of them and say, if you left us a little bit of color in there, it'd be very interesting.
I mean, like a pail?
Like there was one church that had a faded red fence in front of it. If you let that red and everything else monochrome, you might have a more interesting image. Do you ever play that way?
I've done that in the past with other things. I've not really tried it with abandoned buildings before, but I see what you're saying. I've done that in landscape shots with, there might be an apple tree in the picture and I'll leave the apples red and then I'll take the whole picture and go to black and white or something like that. But
So you think it does work occasionally?
They do. I think, there's some techniques that got overused and they kind of get abused a bit, but I still think that there's an opportunity for several of those shots to be pulled out and drawn out.
Mhm.
And that's one of them, the selective color in monochrome.
Yeah. You use Silver Effects Pro for that really easily, right? There's
I really like it. I find it to be, it reminds me of working in the black and white darkroom. It seems like I have a lot of the same impact when I use the sliders as when I would use the contrast filters on the enlarger. It just seems like it works similar.
right. Any other questions for Keith? Somebody had, let's see. Somebody says, great presentation. Thanks for sharing it. We're not going to go over bracketing one more time. We're not going to do that. No, sorry. And somebody thought that
But
you were
call
wrong.
me. I'd be happy to go over it with you if you want to call me. But wait till Monday. I got a trip coming up.
Oh yeah, Nalini Mahajan can call you. Keith might be calling you
Okay.
over that. This one guy thought that Google satellites were taken from airplanes, not satellites. And I don't know anything about that. So maybe Someone can.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know there is a whole division of the Department of Interior that still does photographic flybys, but I think they're saving those for specialty items like infrared for keep an eye on foliage and water flowage but I mean, yeah, they got to be pretty high, but they might be able to. Either way, it's not cloudy.
Right. All right. If there are no more questions, Keith, thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. You know, I think everybody has learned at least one thing from
I hope so.
your
Very
talk.
cool. Well, I appreciate it. You know, it was a beautiful, nice, warm evening. You guys could have been doing 150 other things, including photography, and you stopped to hear me talk, and that's humbling. I appreciate the opportunity. If you guys like to get out and do fun things, you know, I got the North Dakota workshop and Oregon Coast workshop this year, and there's still room. So you can just check out my website and go to workshops, and a lot of questions answered there as well, or just call me or email me. I'm easy to get a hold of. You know,
And can we post the presentation?
you may.
And I'll have your website and all of that stuff will be linked.
Oh, that'd be great.
Presentation so that they, you know, and the description of the seminar and all that will be all on there.
Okay, cool.
All right. So
Well, thanks, everybody. Have a
thank you,
great
everybody.
night.
We'll see you all next month for the social media by Jim Frazier, some insights on social media by Jim Frazier. The third Thursday of the month, same time, 7 o'clock. I'll send out an email. All right. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Right, thank you, Keith. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thanks again, Keith. And thanks for the inspiration for the Photo Club Revolution.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't the plan, but I'm glad it turned into one.
Yeah, it was like everything led from talking to you that day. So
Outstanding. That's
All right.
exciting.
okay.
Woo-hoo.
Bye-bye.
Good night.